Hi, I'm Nadine, the owner of Hopeful, and I'm here today with Candice Collins. Candice and I have been friends for a few years now, and she has the most incredible, inspiring story about how she found her spirituality, and I'd love to share it with everyone today. So I think let's go straight into it and discuss how spirituality changed your life. How did you begin? Where did it discover you, or you discover it?
Okay, so I think most of my life I was quite skeptical when it came to kind of spiritual things.
As most people are.
Yes. And I was never overly religious. I was raised strict Catholic. I think the whole kind of being forced into something kind of pushed me away from it more. And I had a few things that happened, in my life, which
Tell me about that.
I think I think when you have something that happens in your life which really scars you emotionally, you start searching for comfort. So you start searching for things that kind of help you understand certain events and just kind of something to bring you peace, anything just to bring you peace. So I had an event where I had, it was an ex-boyfriend of mine, but we remained absolute best friends. He was the funniest human being on the planet. I think, everyone who knew him knew he was just this big, bubbly personality, and everyone just loved him. He was hard not to like, and a very positive person, and the last person that you would ever kind of expect to struggle with mental health. He was very good at hiding it, as most of us are,
It's always those special souls that struggle the most.
Yes. So I immigrated. I grew up in Zimbabwe and I immigrated to Johannesburg, and we
How long
remained
ago was this, if I may ask?
about 15 years ago, I would say.
Okay.
And we remained in contact. We used to chat. At that point, WhatsApp wasn't a thing, it was SMS.
Mix it.
Exactly. And I feel so old.
What was the BlackBerry one?
Yes.
BBM or
Exactly,
something?
BBM. And we would keep in contact via SMS once a week or whatever. And I remember I was writing my prelim exams. I was in grade 11 in Johannesburg, and we kind of didn't chat for a few weeks. I was under pressure with studying. He had a few struggles at home. He had a father who was a bit of a womanizer and an alcoholic that kind of just abandoned him and moved over to Brazil. And he was very close with his grandparents. As far as I remember, I think one of his grandparents had passed away. And he was working in Mozambique. And we had mutual friends which we met through, which we're still in close contact with his family. And I remember I have this strange thing which has always been this nagging thing that it's happened to me quite a few times, and I've never been able to explain it.
But it's like a sixth sense, would you say?
I would say so, but sometimes before someone passes away, sometimes it's not even someone that I'm that close with, I get this nagging feeling that I need to just contact them, and not because I know what's going to happen. It's because I just get this weird feeling like, I must message, and it won't just be a feeling in passing, it will be a nagging feeling. And I had this nagging feeling, you need to message, check in on him, check how his week is going. And I didn't. I was so busy, I was so overwhelmed, I was struggling with living in a new city. And it was on the Monday I was having this nagging feeling. And on the Wednesday, now after we hadn't spoken in about 3 weeks, our mutual friends contacted me and they said that he had passed away. And I didn't know how to comprehend the information. I mean, I was 16 at the time. It's a very impressionable age, I think. And I didn't cope very well with it at all. No one would kind of tell me what had happened, how he had passed. I think they knew that it would traumatize me quite greatly. So although not having closure kind of adds to trauma in some situations, which this one did, And I struggled. Then I found out a few weeks later that he had committed suicide, which I struggled to understand why or how did it happen, or and then I sat with a lot of guilt, obviously, because
you blame yourself.
exactly
What could I have done?
I had this nagging feeling, and I dropped the ball on communication for a few weeks, and I had a huge sense of guilt and a huge sense of just this I think it's like almost like a separation anxiety feeling, this kind of despair with the lack of closure.
And how did you deal with that?
I didn't. I ended up on a huge amount of antidepressants, mood stabilizers, tranquilizers. My anxiety was through the roof. I struggled to even go to college some days. It was really overwhelming, and I had many periods during that, it was about 6 years that I struggled with this, if not longer, that I was also having suicidal thoughts, and because I just had no quality of life. I was so anxious, I was so depressed, I was just in this horrible dark space, and when you don't have any quality of life, you start feeling like, it's just too hard to be here. And it took a long time, many years, to find out how he had committed suicide. I think that also it reopened the wound all over again, instead of me just kind of getting all the information in one go at the beginning and dealing with it and kind of living with it. It was small pieces. He shot himself, which I think it's probably one of the most traumatic ways in which someone could go, So I sat with the guilt. I didn't have closure. It bothered me every single day, to be honest with you. Every single day it bothered me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was affecting my relationships, my everyday life. It was just, I couldn't let it go. I could not let it go. And after that incident, quite a few years later, when I was pregnant with my daughter, my uncle, who was also, again, a super bubbly, amazing person, was so unfazed by anything serious. He was the chilled one, Mm-hmm. He was the person my mom phoned the first time I ever got drunk. She phoned him. My dad was overseas and she didn't know what to do, and I was so ill. She was panicking, and she phoned my uncle. And he kind of like guided her in the right direction. But he was that kind of just, he was the fun uncle, he was a real character. And he had a beautiful family who I don't imagine him ever wanting to leave. He was in construction, and there was some issues with some, you get these construction gangs, and they feel entitled to the government tenders. And coming from Johannesburg, they had relocated to Durban, and he was getting all the work because his quality of work was excellent. His work ethic was out of this world.
So he was basically competition.
He was huge competition,
yeah.
And it turned into a situation of him getting death threats, and it turned into, his family being, his family was being threatened, but he never told my aunt that. He didn't want to upset them. He didn't want to
make them worry. Yeah.
Exactly. He was being a protective dad, and he didn't really share much about what was going on, the full extent of it. And it got to a point where, he was the kind that will just give you the middle finger if you threaten him. He was
man after my own soul.
Yeah, I know. I get it from, to a certain degree, and. He went and actually handed in information on some of these guys to the police a few weeks before this incident that I'm about to talk about now. And he was working a few hours away from home, so he was renting a beach house. And on the Monday, so he would come home for weekends and then go back. And on the Monday, my aunt saw him getting his gun out of the safe, and she said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said to her, he's just feeling a bit unsafe and he's just going to take it with. So she didn't think anything of it. About 3 hours later, she got a weird SMS on her phone from him. I'm sure you have this as well. How certain people talk to you, the kind of language that they use when they speak to you, what they call you, the
emojis they use.
Exactly.
Of course,
you learn someone's communicative patterns, okay? And she got this this message from him, and it was just weird. You know, she firmly stands by the fact that she just knew that it wasn't written by him. And it basically said, you know, you and the kids will be safer without me. He had 2 beautiful, at that stage, almost teenage kids, a son and a daughter, who he was absolutely smitten with. And he said, you guys will be safer without me. And I don't know what the rest of the SMS actually said. I can't remember. And she tried to phone him, naturally, and he didn't answer. And she got in the car with one of her good friends, and they drove through. And the front door of the accommodation was open. It was like a beach house. It wasn't in apartments or anything. The front door was open, and he was lying on the bed, and he had been shot in the head. And they staged it as a suicide. We were all adamant that it wasn't. You know, he was kind of lying on the bed with his, you know, when you sit on the edge of the bed and your feet are on the floor and you just lie back on the bed. And that's how the position he was in. And the gun was in his hands, perfectly placed on his lap. I mean, if you had shot yourself in the head,
yeah, it would make...
that wouldn't be, you wouldn't be lying perfectly in that, you know, in that position. So they got the cops involved. Obviously the cops in that area, you know, weren't very helpful. They didn't do much to gather any information. They kind of just ruled it on the spot as a suicide, and they weren't willing to really assist with anything further than that. They didn't want to entertain, you know, the idea that it was possibly a murder. And yeah, we kind of sat with that, again, no closure.
How did you deal with that trauma? What did you...
It was really difficult. It was difficult, and it was, I think the hardest part was that we knew
something was
fishy, especially the coincidence that, you know, he had handed in information to the police a few weeks prior about these guys.
And all you want is answers. You just want that closure.
I feel like closure brings peace, you know. It's the only peace you can have in these kind of situations, unless you kind of dig deep enough to, you know. But it's the anger part. It's anger. I think anger is a big part of it, to be honest with you. I mean, when you know someone has taken someone away from your family, and you're not getting any justice. There's no prosecution happening. There's nothing. It's something that enrages you. It really does.
And there's so many families out there that, you know,
they just never get closure. They never get peace, and they just never get justice. I think that's a big thing. So that was something that the whole family struggled with for a long time. And then quite a few years later, I think it was about 2 years after my uncle's death, I was talking to a good friend, and...
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
What did life look like for you at that point in time before you carry on with
Look, I mean, obviously I had my daughter. I was happy to a degree, but it was this, in the background, it was this, you know, kind of background noise that was just these unanswered things, you know, with my ex that had passed away. It was the guilt. The guilt never went away. It bothered me on a daily basis, you know, permanently, every single day. And with my uncle, it was anger. It was anger that we learned how to live with it, but we were still... There was this constant anger within a lot of us in the family. Like, my aunt was absolutely beside herself on a regular basis. Like, it's something you just can't move on from. So, yeah, there was no peace, you know, there was no real inner peace because of these situations. And, you're just constantly searching. I mean, I think both of us, my aunt also, she saw a clairvoyant,
Okay.
I think. About 6 months after my uncle's passing, and she didn't really get any answers, but you know, the lady she saw did warn her that sometimes if, you know, someone's passed too recently, sometimes you won't be able to communicate with them. I'm not sure exactly how
almost like their soul hasn't passed over.
Yes, yeah. Almost like they're still kind of in limbo. Yeah, that's exactly. So she never really got any answers, and I think that just made her more angry. You know, she felt like she really wanted to believe that there was a way of communicating with him. And I think she was also angry at him, you know, why didn't you take this opportunity to communicate with me, you know? And she was just angry. That made her even worse, to be honest with you, because she didn't get any answers. Yeah, and that's...
And then so what happened, what was the turning point in your life that helped you cope with these two deaths that impacted your life for so long?
So I was with a friend, a good friend, the one day, and he was a very cynical person. So I kind of know with him, you know, unless something is black and white, he is not going to kind of pay much attention to it, or, you know, really believe in anything that there's no solid evidence. And I was quite shocked the one day when we were chatting, and he, you know, he was a bit of a high profile person, and with that comes obviously, you know, you constantly have issues with other people and competition and rivals, and there's, you know, there's constant threat of, what do you want to call it? I don't know. There's constant threats, you know, they're living a life of
looking over your shoulder. Especially when you're financially stable and you have a lot more than others, you know.
And just so many people you're doing business with, and, you know, there's bound to be kind of conflicts. And he was telling me the one day about this amazing woman that he talks to on a regular basis, who kind of gives him insight into certain things. You know, she has warned him about certain things that, you know, they came to be true, and it saved his life a few times. And I was quite shocked when he was talking about this, because I thought, you know, I would never have taken him as someone to believe in someone, you know, having this kind of foresight or this kind of like spiritual ability. And I was really intrigued. And I didn't tell him my stories because I was so skeptical. I thought to myself, you know, if I tell someone the stories, I'm just going to assume that they've told this person. And when I talk to her, she's just going to
know, like,
exactly. She's going to relay the information as if she wasn't told. And
because let's be honest, a lot of people think that psychics or spiritual people read your body language,
and some of them do. You know, you get in any industry, you get fly-by-nights who are kind of impersonating, you know, the legit people. And I didn't want to have any thoughts of, you know, maybe it's not.
You wanted some clarification.
Exactly. Maybe it's not organic. So I decided to make contact with her.
What was her name?
Aida.
Aida.
Yes. And I decided to make contact with her. I didn't tell her anything about myself. You know, all she wanted was my first name. I think that was it. I can't remember if she asked me my birth date, but it was just my first name as far as I remember. And we scheduled a video call because she, you know, she was traveling, I think, at the time. And yeah, she's quite busy. So, I mean, and I know she's not a commercial kind of advertised person. It's all word of mouth, and she's got so many referrals, obviously, because she's just amazing in what she does. So it took a few weeks for me to get an appointment, and we finally did our video call. And it started off, you know, I had a few other things going on in my life at that time, a few like relationship turmoils and, you know, things I kind of wanted clarity on. So at the beginning of the video call, she said to me, "What do you want to get out of this?" And I actually didn't have any expectations. I didn't want to set myself up for failure. I didn't want to sit with disappointment. So I kind of just said to her, "You do your thing," because she said she's going to do a bit of a card reading in the beginning. I said to her, "You do your thing and let's see what comes up. So let's just go with it." And she started with her card reading, and she brought up, you know, a lot of the relationship turmoils that I was facing without me mentioning anything. And she gave me a lot of clarity. And I was like, okay, you know, okay, that's impressive, fine. I was still very skeptical. And halfway through the reading, she said to me, "Someone wants to talk to you." Now, I was sitting at home alone. I kind of was, okay, you know, a little bit nervous, a little bit taken aback. And she said to me, so my uncle's name was Craig. I didn't mention my uncle to her, didn't mention anything about what had happened, didn't mention my ex was called Barry. And she said to me, "Craig." And I thought, wow, okay. he's butting into our conversation. Typical.
Just like him.
Yeah, exactly. And then she just mentioned, I was pregnant at the time with my daughter. And so obviously she never got to meet my uncle. I think I was 8 months pregnant when he passed away. And she said to me, he's acknowledging your little girl and sending love to her. And that was crazy. I just thought like, whew, And then he said to me, he's sending love to, he mentioned my dad's name and middle name, which I thought, oh, okay. And
you also mentioned something about eating.
Yes, so I'll touch on that now. That was such a funny little, such a funny little thing that she mentioned. She mentioned his kids. She mentioned them by name.
Wow.
And by their nicknames that he actually used to call them.
That's incredible.
And I thought, okay. And there was just so many things. I mean, his son had just gotten a tattoo in his memory, and I think he was 18 at the time, and his best friend had actually passed away a few days after my uncle. It was crazy in the gym. And he said thank you for getting this tattoo in memory of me. I appreciate it, but please don't get any more. And he had actually planned to get a second one. So it was just so funny that he mentioned that, and just very spot on. And he mentioned my aunt had just moved house. She had sold their house and she had moved, and she was very skeptical about if she had made the right decision, and I think she felt a bit guilty for moving out of their family home. And he said he was proud of her and it was the right move to move house. And he said, he mentioned a few things to me which I wasn't sure of. I had to phone my aunt after the conversation. I didn't tell her that I was doing this reading. And he mentioned something about, he wants to say thank you for the photos of him on the children's wooden window frames or something like that. And I didn't know what he was talking about in that. I had to phone her afterwards. And when I phoned her afterwards, she said for Father's Day, she gave the kids each a photo of him in a frame, and they stuck it on their wooden windowsills. So that's crazy. She just burst out crying when I mentioned these things to her.
A little bit in tears.
And then there were some documents which she was struggling to find, and he mentioned a few places where there was, documentation or whatever. I'm not sure if she's actually followed up on that. Something else he mentioned, which was quite crazy. I'm trying to remember. But then in terms of the eating, my uncle was the kind of person, and I'm not over exaggerating. He would get, those small McDonald's burgers, the normal original little cheeseburgers. He would buy about 10 of those and he would just eat them. And we used to think, where is it going? Because he had a nice build, he was a good looking guy. And he used to just pack these burgers away, and we all just used to think like, what? Because we couldn't ever get to that amount. And Ida looked at me and she said, he's been eating this entire time. So that was really funny. That was so funny. And there was something that my little cousin, the girl, was wanting from our aunt that was very expensive. And I think he mentioned like, no, it's not the right time. Because she was at a stage where I think when your kids lose their father, you want to keep them as happy as you can, and you want to make them happy and be the best mom. And he said, don't do it, it's not the right time. And I think that was, I'm trying to remember now, I think that was my full conversation with him.
So that is essentially gave you a little bit of closure in terms of that, and your aunt as well.
And then in terms of this is the most important part, which I almost missed out now. Ida said to me, she got quite serious, and she just said to me, when people commit suicide, she said they don't come through in a reading very clearly, because she said the traumatic way in which they passed. She said they normally don't come through very clearly. It's normally a little bit like muffled, or she can't really understand exactly what they're saying. And she said to me, this is not a person who committed suicide. He's coming through so clearly. He's coming through, in good spirits. And she said to me she feels impact in her head as if she got shot in the back of the head or the side of the head.
And this is with you not telling her
nothing.
Anything about
even when
you
she
come
was
from,
no,
where you been, what you've been through.
nothing. Even when she was talking, I was making sure not to give her further information. When she was telling me he says this and he says that, I was going, okay, I wasn't feeding any information. So she said she can see him sitting on the edge of a bed, which I didn't tell her any of this. And she said she can see 3 people in the room with him. Yeah. And those are the 3 people we're assuming are the ones that he had given information to the police. And they had actually been arrested but released on bail about a week or 2 before he passed away. She said she can see 3 people in the room. She said she can't see their faces, but there was 3 people in the room with him when he died.
And so I wanted to ask you, after receiving this information, how did this help you in terms of your closure and your trauma to heal, hearing this from Aida?
I think it was, especially from my aunt's side, sometimes when someone leaves us and they commit suicide, it sounds a bit selfish, but you're cross with them because why did they leave you behind? And my aunt, why did you leave me with 2 kids? Why did you leave your kids? She was with him from the age of, I think, 16 or 17. They were together for such a long time. They were, high school sweethearts. They were each other's everything. They were absolute soulmates. And I think it helped her anger a lot because she had that closure that he didn't do it. And although it didn't help the anger towards the people who committed the crime, because, I think there was a lot of protection on their side that they never got prosecuted. It just, just knowing what happened and knowing that we were right in our
feelings, your intuition.
Exactly. In our suspicions, we were right. So that gave closure. And I think it was just, knowing that he's okay and, he's still stuffing his face. And
which makes you happy, at least he's still eating.
It was just really, it was nice. It was a nice interaction and it just brought peace,
Yeah. I feel so much for what you've gone through, and I sympathize. I wanted to also ask and touch base on anything else that Aida maybe gave you, or the information she shared with you that helped you find spirituality, because you're a very spiritual person now.
Yes,
we share so many stories and you're just like, I get it. And it's so nice having that person to be able to share that with.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for you.
But
what was it that kind of helped you with your exes?
Okay, so after that, we kind of carried on with the card reading, and then she said to me, someone else is coming through, but she said not very clearly. And it was just crazy that she said that after she had just, explained the whole suicide kind of thing and how people come through during that. And she said to me something which just like struck a chord within me. We used to call Barry Basil. That was our little nickname for him. And I still have so many letters that he wrote me in high school because he was at boarding school. He was very naughty, mischievous, cute little boy. And we used to write each other letters all the time. And because we only saw each other in school holidays, like every 3 weeks, when he was back, or the school holidays. And I had kind of forgotten about that nickname to a little bit of a degree. It was quite a while down the road now. And she said, Basil. And I just couldn't believe, And I said, yeah. And then she said, it was just, she kind of, she said, oh, he's such a sweetheart. And I was in tears, I couldn't believe it, because that was Barry. There's no better way to describe him. He was just amazing. And she said to me, he wants you to know that he had a lot of childhood demons and traumas. Like, I knew a little bit of it, but not the full extent. And she said there was lots that you didn't know and lots that he protected you from that he's never spoken to really anyone about. And I was like, okay. And then she said, he wants you to know that he is happy with his decision and he's at peace where he is, and he would do it again. You know, there's nothing he would have done differently, and there's nothing you could have done to stop what was going to happen.
How did that make you feel?
Just relieved, babe. I was so relieved, and I was so just, you know, like sad because he was going through all of these things that I didn't know about. So I was sad that he was, you know, dealing with that burden on his own. I was relieved and excited to talk to him, to have some form of communication after so long, because you miss someone, you know, you really do. And yeah, it was just an immediate sense of peace, you know, about something that had been bothering me every day for years. I mean, I still have his cell phone number in my phone. Like, I just can't delete it. And then she said to me, which is crazy, because since he passed, I used to get, have you ever been sitting somewhere and
get those chills?
You just get a chill and this overwhelming sense of, like, you know, there's someone around you, and it's a little bit scary, it's a little bit, you know, daunting. And I used to get that from time to time, but I used to get nervous. It used to freak me out. And it always seemed to happen when I was on my own. And she said to me, he loves you. He wants to let you know that he loves you, and that he comes to see you sometimes, but you get scared. And I was like, wow, that's, you know, it was crazy.
Things she couldn't possibly know.
No, she said, you get scared, and you just, you know, you mustn't get scared. It's just, she said something which is really interesting, that when someone passes away from a suicide, because it's a traumatic way in which they passed, she said sometimes when they're around you, you almost mistake it for, you know, bad energy, because it's a lot of trauma. So she said, you know, don't get scared. It's, you know, he's just visiting you in those moments. And that was, it was amazing. And from that day, if I tell you, I think you become a lot more open to things once you kind of start realizing that, you know, there's a whole other world out there.
And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, if you don't, I know a lot of people that are so skeptical, and if you can't touch or see it, it's almost like it's not real. But how we feel is such an important thing. You can feel frequencies, you can feel energy, and it's a real thing. And to know that this really does exist and can help other people come to terms with their trauma or their shadow selves or whatever it is that they're going through, it makes me so proud to actually sit here and share your story with everyone, because I think it's powerful. I think it's powerful to find spirituality, especially in the midst of the darkness. Like they always say, you can't be in the light if you haven't walked through the dark.
100%, yeah.
And I wanted to also touch base on you in terms of how did you deal with mental, emotional, and physical aspects of doing this reading with you? How did your life change after that? What was it that made you go from being severely depressed, almost suicidal basically, to, you know, where you are today, sitting right across from me?
I think it was such an overwhelming sense of closure and just peace. And, you know, from that day I stopped blaming myself, and I stopped, I wasn't living with the what ifs anymore. And now I'm at a point where I think of him from time to time, Barry now, and I can smile about it, and I'm like, okay, you know, and it's not an everyday weighing on my heart and just bothering me, pestering me mentally, you know. It's now it's a happy memory that I kind of am able to think of, and it's not something pestering me on a day-to-day basis. And with my uncle, you know, it just brought peace and closure. It brought a lot of peace. So yeah, it was almost like an instant relief. It was crazy. I feel like I almost took a pill and it just made me better. It's weird. It's
a little bit addictive.
It is. And I mean, I've spoken to her since then, you know, when I've gone through a bit of difficulty with whatever in life. And she's just given me insight and given me a bit of guidance. And I think it's also comforting. I don't know if you agree, but I feel like it's quite comforting to just know that you've got loved ones that are still looking out for you, and they're still there, and they're still, they're still protecting you and watching over you. And it's not just, for me, it's the comfort that it's not just this, blackness, in my opinion. Once you go, it's not, I know a lot of people still believe that is the case, but there's just no other way to describe the interaction that I had with her.
Do you think if you never met Aida and she never told you this, that you'd be in a different space in your life right now?
I think I would have just, you keep plodding on, and you keep, you kind of just find a way to live with it, but you're not at peace. You're at like constant, like spiritual turmoil,
And
so
did it connect you deeper with spirituality and signs and so many people, they're so scared to talk about like spirits, spirituality, auras, tarot cards. Has it opened your mind to all these things, and you're like more interested in connecting with people that have all these spiritual gifts?
Definitely. I find it, and that's why I think like I touch base with her on a regular basis, because I just find it so helpful. It's, they talk about spirit guides. I find it so helpful to just, tap into that, and not just when you're going through a tough time, but when you're just looking for a little bit of guidance or a little bit of,
there you go, spirit guides.
It's definitely, it's completely transformed the way that I see things.
So obviously, for me, you introduced me to Aida, and I've done numerous readings with her. She's not the only one that has been helping me on my journey, and I think what we should do is definitely share her details with everyone who wants to do a reading. I'll leave the tag in the podcast, in the video, in the links.
Okay.
So next time I'm definitely going to be going into a little bit more with Aida. My next interview is going to be with her, so I hope you're going to be watching that.
I can't wait to watch that.
And I'll talk about how I found spirituality as well. But I thank you so much for this. I'm so honored to share your story with the world. I think it's really powerful. Thank you for this.